"This ticket can't be yours, honey." The gate agent's voice was pure venom. She smirked at the black woman in sweats, then ripped her passport in two, igniting a firestorm that would burn an entire airline to the ground. Dr. Maya Lincoln felt the exhaustion deep in her marrow, a phantom weight that had settled there after 10 days of high-stakes deception. For the better part of 2 weeks, she had inhabited a series of sterile hotel rooms in San Diego, leading Operation Nightjar, a complex undercover audit of airport security protocols on the West Coast. The operation was her creation, a meticulously designed stress test intended to expose the vulnerabilities in the nation's aviation security from the inside. It was grueling, thankless work that demanded constant vigilance, feigned ignorance, and endless, encrypted reports filed in the hollow hours of the night. Now, all that separated her from her own bed in Washington, D.C. was a single flight. She had deliberately chosen her attire for the journey home, simple charcoal gray joggers, a well-worn Spelman College sweatshirt that felt like a hug, and comfortable sneakers. Her hair, a cascade of intricate braids, was pulled back into a neat, tight bun. After a week of rotating through carefully constructed personas, the flustered tourist, the demanding corporate traveler, the anxious first-time flyer, all she craved was the cloak of invisibility. Her first-class ticket, a small but necessary indulgence after the mission's intensity, was her quiet reward. It promised a wider seat, a sliver of peace, and the mental runway to decompress. Denver International Airport was, as ever, a cathedral of controlled chaos. The iconic tinted roof created a diffused, almost ethereal light, but down below, the energy was purely terrestrial. The low rumble of rolling suitcases, the distant, melodic chime of boarding announcements, and the murmur of 1,000 intersecting lives blended into a unique hum. Maya navigated the river of humanity with the practiced economy of a seasoned traveler, her backpack slung over one shoulder. It contained nothing more than a laptop, a paperback novel, and a thick, confidential file of preliminary findings that would soon send shockwaves through the aviation industry. She arrived at Gate C-38, where Apex Airways Flight 714 to Reagan National was scheduled to begin boarding in 20 minutes. The gate area was already a crowded mosaic of humanity, a young family attempting to wrangle 3 overexcited children, a phalanx of businessmen in identical charcoal suits, an elderly couple meticulously sharing a bag of trail mix. And then there was the gate agent. Her name tag, pinned crookedly on her uniform, read Karen in a crisp, corporate font. Karen Foster was a woman in her late 40s, with a brittle, oversprayed blonde hairstyle that seemed to defy gravity and thin, disapproving eyebrows that were permanently arched in a state of judgment. She moved with an air of theatrical self-importance, her fingers tapping on her keyboard with unnecessary force, her voice sharp and condescending as she dismissed a passenger's question about a delay. Maya watched her for a moment, the investigator in her unable to completely switch off. She observed Karen's interactions with a clinical eye. A smiling, rosy-cheeked white family approached with a question about their seat assignments. Karen became a beacon of saccharine sweetness, calling the children "sweetheart" and assuring the parents everything was perfect. An elderly Latino man followed, asking softly in accented English if he was at the right gate for Miami. Karen didn't look up from her screen, snapping, "Sir, listen for the announcements. It'll board when it boards." Maya felt a familiar, weary pang. It was a textbook case of what her field called authority contamination, when an individual in a position of minor power uses it to enforce their own prejudices, creating a hierarchy of service based on race, dress, or perceived status. It was one of the countless human factors that could compromise security, a tiny crack in the system's armor that could be exploited. Finally, the announcement for pre-boarding crackled to life. "We now invite our first-class passengers to begin boarding. Please have your boarding pass and a valid government-issued ID ready for inspection." Maya joined the short line. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, placed her phone, displaying the digital boarding pass, on the scanner, and held out her United States passport. Karen glanced at the boarding pass, then her eyes did a slow, deliberate crawl over Maya. From the prestigious college name on her sweatshirt down to her sneakers, and back up to her face. The fake smile she'd given the family moments before had vanished, replaced by a flat, challenging stare. "A passport? For a domestic flight?" Karen asked, her tone dripping with manufactured suspicion. "It's my primary form of government ID." "It's valid," Maya replied, her voice even and calm. She had used it all week without a single issue. It was standard. Karen took the dark blue booklet, her fingers flipping through it with a dismissive air. She held it up to the light, angled it, then squinted at the photo. "This picture doesn't look much like you." Maya stood perfectly still. The photo was 5 years old, but it was unmistakably her. "My face has changed less than you'd think," she said, still keeping her tone light, professional. Karen let out a short, derisive bark of a laugh. "Funny. You look younger here. Happier." She tapped a manicured, blood-red nail on the data page. "Dr. Maya Lincoln." "Oh, dar. How cute." She looked up, her eyes gleaming with malice. "What did you get your little degree in, basket weaving?" The microaggressions were piling up, each one a tiny, sharp-edged cut designed to make her feel unwelcome, illegitimate. Maya recognized the pattern instantly. It was a script she had seen play out countless times, not just in her professional life but in her personal one. The questioning of her credentials, the insinuation of dishonesty, the naked challenge to her very presence in a space where Karen felt she didn't belong. "My doctorate," Maya stated, her voice losing its lightness and taking on a new, professional clarity, "is in systems engineering, with a focus on human factors in aviation safety. Is there a problem with the document, or may I board the plane?" The directness of the question, the sheer, unadorned professionalism of it, seemed to provoke Karen. Her lips tightened into a razor-thin line. "There's a problem with me believing this is a legitimate document," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, yet loud enough for the people in line behind Maya to hear clearly. "First class, brand new passport, it just doesn't add up." The passport wasn't new. Its cover was pristine because Maya treated her federal documents with the profound respect they deserved. The accusation, ugly and baseless, hung in the air. The people in line behind her began to shift, their discomfort a palpable presence. "I can assure you, it's legitimate," Maya said, her patience, already worn thin from a week of high-stress work, beginning to fray. "It was issued by the U.S. Department of State. You can verify its authenticity using your system. I would like to get to my seat." Karen leaned forward, a cruel, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Or maybe you bought it. People like you can be very resourceful. I've seen it all. Fake IDs, fake credit cards." She looked Maya up and down again, her gaze lingering on the Spellman sweatshirt with contempt. "Fake everything." Maya's blood ran cold. The insult was no longer veiled. It was a direct, racist assault, delivered under the fluorescent lights of a public airport, cloaked in the thin veneer of corporate authority. She knew the protocol. She had helped write it. Don't escalate. Handle uncooperative personnel with professional detachment. But she was also human, and the crushing exhaustion of her week, coupled with the sheer audacity of the attack, was stripping away her composure layer by layer. "Ma'am," Maya said, her voice now as hard and unyielding as steel, "you are making serious, unfounded accusations. Scan the document, verify it, or call your supervisor. But you will not stand here and slander me." Karen seemed to relish the confrontation. It was exactly the reaction she had been baiting. She held the passport up between her thumb and forefinger as if it were a contaminated object. "Oh, I'll do more than that," she hissed, her eyes gleaming with a strange, vindictive fire. "I'm going to resolve this situation. Right now." And with a sudden, sharp twist of her wrists, she ripped the passport in two. The sound was shockingly intimate in the relative quiet of the boarding area. A soft, tearing sound, rip, that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the space around them. It wasn't loud, but it was obscene in its finality. The two halves of the blue booklet, with Maya's pristine photo and the nation's seal now brutally severed, fluttered from Karen's fingers and landed on the counter with a quiet, definitive thud. For a long moment, there was absolute silence. The passengers in line stared, their mouths agape. The businessmen had stopped their hushed conversations. The children in the family group were frozen, their boisterous energy instantly extinguished. A young woman standing a few people back in the economy line instinctively raised her phone, its camera lens a small, dark, unblinking eye. Karen stood with her chest puffed out, a triumphant look plastered on her face, as if she had just single-handedly vanquished a great evil. Maya looked down at the two pieces of her passport. The document that had carried her across the world, the symbol of her citizenship, the proof of her identity, lay in ruins. And in that moment, the weary traveler, the invisible woman in sweats, ceased to exist. In her place, Dr. Maya Lincoln, Senior Field Inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of National Security and Incident Response, the architect of Operation Nightjar, took over. The exhaustion was incinerated, replaced by a surge of glacial, crystalline focus. Karen had no idea what she had just done. She thought she had won a small, petty battle against a person she deemed unworthy. She couldn't have been more wrong. She had just declared war. The silence that followed the ripping of the passport was profound. It was a vacuum, a void where the normal hum of the airport had been. Every eye at gate C-38 was locked on the scene, a tableau of malice and disbelief. Karen seemed to bask in the attention. She crossed her arms, a smug, self-satisfied smirk etched onto her face. In her mind, she had exposed a fraud and protected the integrity of her airline. She was the hero of her own small, ugly story. Maya did not look at Karen. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. Her gaze was fixed on the two halves of her passport lying on the worn laminate countertop. The crisp edges of the tear were a visceral wound. She saw the severed eagle on the Great Seal of the United States, a symbol of the nation she served, now bisected by an act of petty hatred. Slowly, she raised her eyes and met Karen's triumphant stare. Karen expected hysterics. She was braced for a tirade, for tears, for a satisfying meltdown that would validate her actions. What she got was something far more unnerving, absolute stillness. Maya's face was a mask of placid control, but her eyes held a new intensity, a focus so sharp and penetrating it felt like a physical force. The air crackled between them. "You have just destroyed a United States federal document," Maya said. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it carried with an unnatural clarity through the silent gate area. It was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of an assessor. A judge. That is a federal offense. Title 18, Section 1543 of the U.S. Code. Mutilation or alteration of a passport. It carries a penalty of up to 25 years in prison. Karen's smirk faltered. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She had been expecting accusations of racism, not citations of federal law. It was a fake, she stammered, her bravado starting to sound hollow. "I was within my rights as an agent of this airline to." "You were not," Maya cut her off, her voice still level but now edged with an authority that was impossible to ignore. "You had a procedure. A procedure you have been trained on, I assume. You are to use the document scanner and the UV light system to verify its features. If you still have doubts, you are to contact a supervisor and airport security. At no point does that procedure involve you, a private citizen employed by a corporation, unilaterally deciding to destroy federal property. You did not follow procedure. Why?" The question hung in the air, cold and sharp. It wasn't an angry outburst, it was an interrogative. The young woman with the phone took a subtle step closer. I used my discretion," Karen said, her voice gaining a desperate, defensive edge. "The safety and security of this flight is my responsibility." "Your responsibility is to follow the law and your company's regulations," Maya countered, taking a deliberate step away from the counter, creating a space of command. She reached into her backpack, her movements unhurried and precise. Karen flinched, as if expecting a weapon. Instead, Maya pulled out her phone. She didn't dial 911. She tapped a single contact on her favorites list. As the phone rang, she spoke, her voice still directed at Karen but intended for the entire captive audience. "Let me tell you what you've done, Karen. You didn't just break the law. You have, with your discretion, compromised the very security you claim to be protecting. An individual who demonstrates such poor judgment, who allows personal bias to dictate their actions, and who is willing to escalate a situation so recklessly, is not a guardian of safety. They are a liability. A massive, gaping liability." The phone clicked on the other end. Maya's demeanor shifted again. The hard edge in her voice softened, replaced by a tone of brisk, professional urgency. "Director Evans, this is Lincoln. Apologies for the direct call. I'm at Denver International, Gate C-38. I'm invoking a Code Onyx on Operation Nightjar. I have an active security breach and willful destruction of federal property by an agent of Apex Airways. I need TSA and the FBI's airport liaison team on site immediately. And get me a direct line to the legal department at Apex Airways corporate headquarters. Inform them they are about to be in breach of their operating certificate." The name Operation Nightjar and the mention of the FBI sent a ripple of shock through the onlookers. The businessmen looked at each other, their eyebrows raised. Karen's face had gone from smug to uncertain to now a pale shade of gray, the color draining from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of disbelief. "No. You're lying," Karen whispered, the words catching in her throat. "You're nobody." Maya ended her call and looked directly at Karen. The mask of the weary traveler was gone, completely burned away by the fire of her purpose. Now, she was every inch the federal officer. "My name," she said, her voice resonating with the full weight of her authority, "is Dr. Maya Lincoln. I am the Senior Field Inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of National Security and Incident Response. The operation I have been leading for the past 10 days is a national audit of your airline's compliance with federal security mandates. Your actions here today, your profiling, your disregard for protocol, and your criminal destruction of my credentials, have not just inconvenienced a passenger. You have provided a live, documented, and frankly spectacular example of exactly the kind of systemic failure we are here to identify and eradicate." She paused, letting the words sink in. "So, to answer my earlier question, Karen, why didn't you follow procedure? Was it inadequate training, or was it something else?" Just then, a harried-looking man in a slightly too tight suit rushed toward the gate, his name tag identifying him as Dave Jensen, station supervisor. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. "Karen, what did you do? We have a flight to board." Karen turned to him, her eyes wide with desperation. "Dave. This woman, she was trying to board with a fake passport. It was a cheap forgery, I confiscated it." Dave looked from Karen's panicked face to Maya's icily calm one. His default setting was to back his employee, smooth things over, get the plane out on time. "Ma'am," he began, his voice a practiced, placating drone, "I'm sure we can. Your time to sort this out has passed, Mr. Jensen," Maya said, her eyes flicking to his name tag. "Your employee has committed a felony. Your airline is now under active investigation by the FAA. Effective immediately, Flight 714 will not be departing. This gate is now a federal investigation scene. Nothing," she said, her gaze sweeping over the counter, "is to be touched." As if on cue, 2 uniformed airport police officers appeared at the end of the jet bridge. They were followed by 2 more individuals in sharp, dark suits who moved with the unmistakable confidence of federal agents. The hum of the airport was returning, but now it was layered with the crackle of police radios. The lead agent, a calm, tall man, approached. "Inspector Lincoln. Agent Davies, FBI. We got the call from Director Evans. What's the situation? Dave Jensen stepped forward, his face a mask of bewildered indignation. Hold on, who's in charge here? This is an Apex Airways gate. I'm the supervisor. The second agent, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, turned her head slowly to look at Dave. Her expression was utterly unimpressed. Sir, she said, her voice flat and cold. The moment a federal crime is committed on airport property, jurisdiction shifts. Right now, we are in charge. Please step back and do not interfere. Dave's mouth opened and closed silently. The corporate rulebook he lived by was being shredded before his eyes. Agent Davies pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves, carefully used a pair of tweezers to pick up the two pieces of the passport, and placed them in an evidence bag. The simple, procedural act seemed to seal Karen's fate more than anything else had. It was no longer an argument. It was Exhibit A. The transition from the public chaos of the gate area to the sterile silence of the interview room was swift and disorienting for Karen Foster. One moment she was the queen of her small kingdom, the next, she was sitting on a hard plastic chair in a windowless beige room. The only furniture was a metal table bolted to the floor. Agent Chen, the sharp-eyed woman from the FBI, sat opposite her, a folder and a pen her only props. Agent Davies stood silently by the door, an immovable presence. Karen's mind was a frantic scramble of denial. This had to be a misunderstanding, a colossal overreaction. She was a good employee, 22 years with Apex Airways, from baggage handler to the coveted position of lead gate agent. She had seniority. She had Dave's protection. This couldn't be happening. I want to call my husband, she said, her voice thin and reedy. And I want to talk to Dave. You will have an opportunity to make a phone call, Agent Chen replied, her tone neutral. She clicked her pen. Mr. Jensen is currently in another room giving his own statement. For now, I just have a few preliminary questions. She opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Karen's employee photo clipped to the top. Full name for the record is Karen S. Foster. Yes, Karen whispered. And you have been the lead gate agent at this station for 7 years? Yes. Agent Chen made a small check mark. Ms. Foster, in your 2 decades with Apex Airways, how many times have you received training on the Passenger Identification and Verification Protocol, also known as PIV? I don't know the exact number. Every year, we have refreshers. And what does that protocol instruct you to do if you suspect a passenger's identification is fraudulent? Karen's throat felt dry. We are supposed to use the verification equipment. The UV light. And if doubts remain, we call a supervisor or airport security. And did you use the verification equipment on Dr. Lincoln's passport? No, Karen admitted. The equipment was right there, built into her counter. It would have taken 5 seconds. And why not? Because I just had a feeling. It looked off. The way she was dressed, her attitude, it was all wrong. I was being proactive about security. Agent Chen's face remained impassive. So you substituted a federally mandated security protocol with a feeling? A feeling based on what you described to your supervisor as this passenger being dressed like that? It wasn't just that. She was arrogant, Karen said, grasping at straws. Challenging my authority. Is it your understanding that a passenger asking you to do your job constitutes a challenge to your authority? Agent Chen countered smoothly. She made another note. Let's move on to the document itself. You stated you believed it to be a cheap forgery. What specific elements of the passport led you to that conclusion? Was the microprinting on the data page flawed? Was the holographic image of the eagle incorrect? Did the binding fail to meet federal standards? Karen stared at her blankly. She didn't know about any of that. She had glanced at the photo and the name and made a judgment. In 22 years, she had never actually studied the security features of a passport. She didn't need to. She just knew. It just looked fake, she mumbled, the weakness of her own excuse echoing in the small room. So to be clear, Agent Chen summarized, her voice cutting through the fog of Karen's panic, with no technical basis, you ignored your training, profiled a passenger based on her appearance and race, and then, when questioned, you committed a felony by destroying the very document you were tasked to inspect. Is that an accurate summary of events? The words, laid out so plainly, were devastating. Karen felt a wave of nausea. I want a lawyer, she whispered. A wise decision, Agent Chen said, closing the folder. Meanwhile, Maya was in the station supervisor's office with Dave Jensen. It was a cluttered, messy space, decorated with dusty awards for on-time departures. In a complete reversal of power, Maya sat in his chair, behind his desk, while he perched nervously on the edge of a visitor's chair. Agent Davies had brought her the initial printouts she'd requested, the gate security footage synced to an iPad, and a thin file, Karen Foster's complaint history. Mr. Jensen, Maya began, her voice calm and measured, I've been reviewing your employee's file. In the last 5 years alone, there have been 14 formal complaints lodged against Ms. Foster. 9 were from passengers of color, 4 from passengers with disabilities, and 1 from a passenger who appeared to be Sikh. Dave shifted uncomfortably. We get complaints all the time. It's the nature of customer service. Oh, I'm not talking about missed flights, Maya said, her eyes narrowing. I'm talking about a complaint from a Mr. Alejandro Velez, who stated Ms. Foster loudly asked if he was legal when he presented a valid Puerto Rican driver's license. I'm talking about a complaint from Dr. Amina Khan, who alleges Ms. Foster lost the bassinet seat assignment for her infant after she requested it. I'm talking about a complaint from a retired Army corporal, a double amputee, who claims Ms. Foster told him he was holding up the line and should have requested wheelchair assistance, even though he was perfectly capable of walking with his prosthetics. She pushed the file across the desk. And on every single one of these, Mr. Jensen, I see your signature. Action taken, counseled employee. Action taken, verbal warning. Action taken, case closed. Tell me, what did this counseling entail? Dave began to sweat profusely. I spoke with Karen. I told her she needed to be more careful with her words. And yet, the pattern continued. It escalated, Maya stated. It went from verbal insults to deliberate obstruction, and today it culminated in a criminal act. What you call counseling, Mr. Jensen, the FAA calls gross negligence. You were not managing an employee, you were enabling a known liability. You cultivated a culture at this gate where prejudice was permissible as long as the planes left on time. You are as culpable in this as she is. Dave's face, already pale, turned the color of ash. Maya stood up. Your airline's operating certificate is contingent on adherence to federal law. That includes provisions against discriminatory practices, as they create volatile and unpredictable security risks. You and your star employee have provided us with a textbook case study. The FAA will be launching a full, top-to-bottom audit of this entire Denver hub, effective immediately. Every log, every employee file, every procedure will be scrutinized. We're going to put your operation under a microscope, Mr. Jensen. And I suspect we're going to find a lot more than just one rogue gate agent. Maya Lincoln's promise to put the Apex Airways Denver hub under a microscope was not a threat, it was a statement of fact. Within hours, what began with a torn passport at Gate C-38 metastasized into a full-scale federal audit. The FAA, moving with a bureaucratic speed reserved for genuine emergencies, descended on Denver International. This wasn't the usual clipboard and checklist team, this was the National Security and Incident Response Unit, the sharp end of the spear. Maya established a command center in a corporate conference room commandeered from Apex, the irony of which was not lost on her. The room quickly filled with laptops, secure servers, and a hand-picked team of investigators known for their ruthless efficiency in sniffing out non-compliance. They were forensic accountants, former NTSB investigators, and data security analysts. They were the people airlines had nightmares about. The investigation radiated outward from Karen Foster. Her work computer was imaged, her email server seized. They found a trove of emails between her and Dave Jensen, a sordid history of complaints met with winking reassurances. "Don't worry about the Valles guy, I handled it," one of Dave's emails read. "Just try to keep it less obvious next time, LOL." That LOL was a nail in his professional coffin. But Karen was just the loose thread. As Maya's team pulled on it, the entire tapestry of the Denver station began to unravel. The audit of employee files, which Dave had so ineptly guarded, revealed that Karen's case wasn't an anomaly, it was just the most egregious example. They found other employees with disturbing patterns, a baggage handling supervisor who consistently mishandled the luggage of passengers with African or Middle Eastern sounding names, a ticketing agent with a statistically impossible record of assigning minority families to non-reclining seats near the lavatories. These were all small acts of degradation, paper cuts of prejudice that had been ignored by a management team focused solely on on-time departure rates. "This isn't a bad apple problem, it's a poisoned orchard," Maya stated during a briefing with her team 2 days into the audit. She stood before a whiteboard covered in diagrams connecting names and incidents. "The culture here, fostered by Jensen and his predecessors, is one of willful blindness. Compliance is seen as a suggestion, not a mandate. The priority is profit and speed. Everything else, including security and basic human dignity, is secondary." The most damning discovery came from the maintenance logs. An analyst, cross-referencing parts inventory with flight records, found discrepancies. Small ones at first, but the pattern was undeniable. Apex Airways Denver station was systematically cutting corners. The analyst flagged the maintenance history of Flight 921, a flight to Chicago 3 months prior that had experienced a terrifying landing gear malfunction on approach, forcing an emergency go-around. The official report, signed by Dave Jensen, blamed an unforeseeable parts malfunction. The FAA audit found the truth. The hydraulic actuator that failed was on its third life extension, 2 past the legal FAA limit. The inspection report for its last check was signed by a mechanic who was, according to payroll records, on vacation in Cancun on the day of the alleged inspection. Dave Jensen had not just ignored racism, he had actively participated in a cover-up that had endangered the lives of 187 passengers. The torn passport was no longer the main crime, it was merely the key that had unlocked a vault of systemic corruption. Maya sat down with Captain Morales, the pilot from the cancelled Flight 714. He had been grounded pending the investigation, along with his crew. He was angry, embarrassed, and terrified for his career. "Captain," Maya began, her tone professional but not unkind, "I've reviewed your record. It's exemplary. Which is why I find it hard to believe you were completely unaware of the lax culture at this station." Morales shifted in his seat. "My job is in the cockpit, Inspector. I rely on my ground crew and my station managers to do their jobs to the letter. I have to trust them." "Trust is not a control, Captain," Maya countered. "It's a variable. Did you ever, in your pre-flight checks, notice anything that gave you pause? Any maintenance sign-offs that seemed rushed?" The captain hesitated, his loyalty to his airline at war with his duty. He was speaking to a federal investigator who already seemed to know the answers to her own questions. "There have been whispers," he admitted reluctantly. "Talk of management pushing us to make faster turnarounds. Pressure to not delay flights for minor write-ups. We're told to use our discretion." "And Karen Foster? What were the whispers about her?" Captain Morales sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Everyone knew about Karen. We called her the gatekeeper. She had her favorites. If you were on her good side, boarding was smooth. If not, well, it wasn't. We just tried to stay out of her way. It was easier than fighting with her and getting Dave involved. So you were aware of her behavior, Maya concluded, and you and others made a conscious choice to ignore it for the sake of an easier day. That, Captain, is called complicity. It's the soil in which people like Karen and Dave grow. The words hit the captain like a physical blow. The investigation was no longer about a single incident. It was about the insidious rot that festers in a large organization when profit is prioritized over people, when accountability is sacrificed for convenience, and when small acts of prejudice are allowed to go unchecked, creating an environment where larger crimes can take root. It all started with one woman's ugly assumption about another woman's place in the world. It was a stark, terrifying reminder of a truth Maya had built her career on: bigotry isn't just a social evil. In the world of aviation, it is a direct and pressing threat to safety. It is a cancer that, left untreated, will always, eventually, spread. The consequences came not with a single thunderclap, but as a series of devastating, targeted lightning strikes. The final report from Operation Nightjar, with the Apex Airways Denver hub as its grim centerpiece, was a masterwork of methodical destruction. It was leaked to a major news outlet, a strategic move by Maya's boss, Director Evans, to ensure the story couldn't be buried. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. For Karen Foster, the karma was swift and absolute. Fired by Apex Airways within an hour of the story breaking, she was arrested the next day. The image of her being led from her suburban home in handcuffs, her face a crumpled mask of disbelief, became the visual icon of the scandal. She was charged with the destruction of a federal document, but the U.S. attorney, spurred by the public outcry and the mountain of evidence of her discriminatory practices, added federal civil rights charges to the indictment. Her feeling about Dr. Maya Lincoln would cost her years of her life. Her legal defense crumbled when Dave Jensen, in a desperate bid for leniency, agreed to testify against her, detailing his years of so-called counseling that were nothing more than a conspiratorial pat on the back. Dave Jensen's fate was, in many ways, worse. He was also fired and faced federal charges, not just for his role in the passport incident, but for the far more serious crime of falsifying safety records and endangering an aircraft. The FAA made an example of him. They didn't just want him to lose his job, they wanted to ensure he could never work in the aviation industry again, in any capacity. Facing decades in prison, he took a plea bargain, receiving a multi-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The man who lived by the corporate ladder died by it, his fall as spectacular as it was deserved. But the true karma was reserved for Apex Airways. The FAA hit them with one of the largest fines in aviation history, a figure with so many zeros it made Wall Street analysts gasp. The fine wasn't just punitive, it was prescriptive. A significant portion of the money was earmarked for a complete, top-to-bottom overhaul of their training, compliance, and hiring practices, all to be monitored by a court-appointed federal overseer for a period of 5 years. Maya Lincoln herself helped write the terms of the settlement. The airline's stock plummeted. Passengers boycotted. The PR nightmare was relentless. The story of the racist gate agent who tore up a passport became a national cautionary tale. The Apex Airways brand, once associated with budget-friendly travel, was now synonymous with prejudice and corruption. The young journalism student who had filmed the initial incident on her phone became a minor celebrity. Her video was played on every news channel, a clear, damning record of Karen's malice. She was praised for her quick thinking and held up as an example of citizen journalism. She later received a quiet, personal note of thanks from Maya. 6 months later, Dr. Maya Lincoln stood at a podium in a congressional hearing room on Capitol Hill. She was no longer in her undercover sweats, but in a sharply tailored navy blue suit. Her demeanor was confident, her voice clear and strong. On a large screen behind her was a high-resolution image of her ripped passport, the two halves now a symbol of a broken system. The events at Denver International were not the result of one employee's bad day, she told the committee of senators. They were the inevitable result of a corporate culture that tolerated bigotry, prioritized speed over safety, and ignored the fundamental principle that security is compromised the moment we begin to make assumptions based on a person's race, religion, or appearance. The actions of Ms. Foster were not just an insult to me personally, they were an affront to every citizen who trusts us to keep them safe. She detailed the findings of the audit the systemic rot her team had uncovered, and the steps being taken to fix it. She spoke with passion and precision, her every word backed by a mountain of undeniable fact. She was no longer just an investigator, she was a reformer, a force for change. After the hearing, as she packed her briefcase, a young African-American congressional aide approached her, her eyes shining with admiration. "Dr. Lincoln," she said, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you. For not backing down. For what you did." Maya offered a small, genuine smile. She thought of the humiliation at the gate, the cold fury that had filled her, and the long, exhausting months that had followed. "I just did my job," she replied. As she walked out into the bright DC sunlight, she felt a sense of profound, weary satisfaction. The karma that had struck Karen, Dave, and Apex Airways wasn't mystical or magical. It was methodical. It was procedural. It was the simple, powerful consequence of a system being forced, finally, to hold the corrupt to account. It was the hard-earned result of one woman refusing to be invisible, and in doing so, ensuring that the ugly rot she had exposed would finally be brought into the light. The story of Maya Lincoln and the gate agent is a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small, have consequences. It shows how one person's courage can trigger an avalanche of accountability, exposing the systemic rot that can hide behind a corporate logo and a plastic name tag. The karma that came for them wasn't just satisfying, it was a necessary cleansing, a vital course correction. If this story resonated with you and you believe in the power of holding people accountable, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. What part of Karen's downfall was the most satisfying for you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect for everyone in the community. And for more true stories of dramatic karma and inspiring triumphs, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.